going to start with letting the panel introduce itself. So I'll start with David De La Rosa.
I am David De La Rosa from, anybody hear me? David De La Rosa from Telit. Telit is a pure play IoT company. We develop modules for the IoT world, from the silicon part all the way to the IT system, including network services, cellular. We also have a strong play in the factory space. We are installed in Fortune 500 companies.
Okay, and Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Schnabel, Director of Engineering and IT for Molisco Engineering. As you saw from the presentation, we're heavy in a process, system integration for pharma, life sciences, food and beverage, dairy brewing. Been with Molisco for 19 years. So seen a lot of different clients, seen a lot of different, kind of seen this industry transition from very proprietary over to the IT-OT convergence.
Okay. And actually, that leads us, Steve, to our first question, is as a systems integrator, how has IT-OT convergence, control and information convergence, affected the systems integrator function?
So it's grown. A lot of our folks are more control, so they're not quite as IT centric. So it's kind of opened up a new challenge for us to teach our guys. Okay, you need to make sure that you're looking at both sides, and we engage both IT and OT together to kind of become the moderator, to kind of bring them together. A lot of times the controls people at the plant may not be talking or as much as they should with their IT counterparts. So we kind of fit that niche in there to kind of bring them together. So it's been a challenge, but it's been ongoing and working out pretty good.
Okay, now Welton, do you leverage systems integrators as well, or is that based on your factory's policy or Johnson & Johnson policy, or how do you leverage systems integrators for your upgrades?
It's a mix of both. Initially, when we bring in hardware equipment, manufacturing platforms, what have you, there's usually a system integrator or an OEM that's involved as far as the building and developing of the system. But from that point forward, depending on the scope and the size and the complexity of the project, we have personnel in-house that can perform some of those functions as well.
Okay, and how about at Bosch & Lomb?
Yes, it really depends on the business. Certainly in our farm and our lens care businesses, we almost exclusively work with OEMs and system integrators.
Yeah. And David, how often would you say systems integrators are involved with deploying your Telit solutions?
Actually, we have a good set of system integrators that use our device-wise tool, but in general, our device-wise tool allows for it bridges the IT and the OT space very quickly without a tremendous amount of effort or even cost of programming. So it actually brings the two worlds together a lot easier than in the past.
Okay. And I have a question across the board we'll go from one end of the panel to the other, probably starting with Brad. What do you see as the biggest challenge that you have in the plant with IT and OT convergence?
I guess I think it's probably getting everybody up to speed on what it is and on why we need to have this IT-OT convergence. So it's selling them on the benefits of improved data access or data collection. And it's also getting the groups together. We're now at Bausch & Lomb, being owned by Valiant, we have a partner in Chicago that helps us with a lot of our IT support and our networking support. So they're not a part of our company. And then we have folks at Valiant, we have folks at Bausch & Lomb. So really from an IT standpoint, we're very fractured. Mm-hmm. So we need to try to bring all those groups together, plus the site groups, to get any significant project done. So it's a real challenge today.
Okay, as a systems integrator, Steve?
Yeah, like I said before, the big challenge is trying to get the two sides working together, and we're kind of the in-between guys. So we gotta play nice with both sides of the fence, and really, like I said, getting them involved early on and not just an afterthought is a big key that we push our guys, and make sure both sides are talking early on and often to make sure that things go off without a hitch.
Okay, and Welton.
I would say I'd like to echo those same sentiments. biggest difficulty is making sure that upfront that the IT and the engineering guys are talking together. As I kind of alluded to in my story, that can cause some big issues that you weren't expecting. I would say probably next to that would be the skill sets that are necessary for both sides to play. That's changed quite a bit over the last 20 years. So you need to know a little bit of both sides of the house. That's controls engineering and a little bit of the IT. And I would say the biggest thing, and probably from an enterprise level for us, challenges is security. That's a big deal, particularly with some of the breaches that happened last year. Where you're talking like Target and Home Depot and those kind of things. Even though we're not like a financial company or anything like that, there's still a lot of data that you wanna that's floating around, and you definitely want to make sure that you're handling that very securely.
Yeah, and David, as far as the challenges you see from Tellet's perspective.
Well, what we see in our customers, the IT and the OT, there's a little level of distrust because the OT space, the control space is very unique, unlike the IT. So what we do, and vice versa, and what we do with our tool, we created this role-based schema that the controls person has full domain of what they know, but has enough visibility to the IT that it will not harm the IT, and the reverse. The IT team has maybe access to 2 process points and maybe read-only, but they don't have access to everything else. So they both are in kind of harmony.
Next question for the panel that we'll work our way down is regarding the Purdue model. Is sometimes when we're talking to customers, some people say the Purdue model is going to live in infamy for a long time. Other people are saying that obviously more of an IoT and getting away from the Purdue model is a way of going. What's your opinion as far as the life of the Purdue model, both in your facilities and in the solutions you deploy? So I'll start with Brad.
I think the Purdue model is a good one. I think it's just a matter of it's kind of the degree of the angle in the triangle. I mean, I think that the triangle is starting to shrink down. ERP wants to get closer to the process wants to get closer to ERP systems. So to do that, we're deploying, as easy to use software tools such as Tellet's, to try to build those bridges. But I think it's still valid to have, because just from a security standpoint, to have these levels in the sand where you define boundary points between what is enterprise, because enterprise kind of connects out to the world. And we don't really want our manufacturing systems connected to the world. We're not really ready yet in a regulated industry to have everything be in the cloud or have everything be accessible.
Steve?
So as a systems integrator, we typically will operate from the low level up to getting data to the enterprise. We don't really transition over that boundary, but what we want to see is more and more the ability to make that connection easy and not have anything custom. The more configurable software that you can have, obviously the easier it is to configure, to install. But for our guys that really aren't IT centric necessarily, to get that data, to be able to expose stuff and be able to work with IT to be able to transition that boundary is pretty important.
Okay, I'll go with Welton as far as the Purdue model in Johnson & Johnson in your plant.
We have a mix of both. I think the Purdue model has its place where it's probably more appropriate depending on what kind of plant you're in. But getting data from the lowest level of where it's generated is definitely going to be we're seeing a lot more of that these days because you've got groups that you might think that are in IT but not really IT folks. They're data analytics people that are looking at sensor data and pressure information that's being pushed up through products like DeviceWise into data lakes and doing sophisticated analysis on it to make the products better or whatever manufacturing processes better. So you definitely, I think you're going to continue to see both, but you're going to see a whole lot more uses of IoT in some of the strangest of places.
Would you agree, David? Or
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with everybody in the panel. The Purdue model is a good guide and is a good discipline on how to do systems, but you want to have the flexibility to send data out of band without disturbing the existing validated systems. For example, if you have a sensor that is about to basically go bad, it could, the system can generate a trouble ticket automatically to like an SAP PM or create a JIRA issue without affecting the Purdue model. So I see more of that happening, and our tool, DeviceWise, allows for that level of integration. You do the data acquisition, but in addition, you could reach the MES layer and the ERP layer easily. But I see that trend happening.
One common thread in all your answers of all the last few questions is certainly we're always talking about connectivity, we're talking about cybersecurity, what is accessible to the outside world, what will never be accessible. What's kind of like obviously there's a trade-off between when the benefits of being connected and the security of either not being connected or having the right firewall. What's kind of the criteria that you use in your respective facilities or that you find your respective customers telling you? So Brad, as far as what's kind of the criteria between the benefit of connectivity versus when it's maybe the risk is too great to connect, or do they feel comfortable yet with the technology available with cybersecurity, or is there still that doubt that maybe we should leave it not connected?
I think probably the prevailing thought is to wait until we feel more comfortable. I think obviously people ask for and try to make more connections, but I think we're really trying to be cautious. We're an industry that tends to be very cautious because of the amount of regulations that we have to comply with. So I think that there's a lot of benefits, but along with those benefits, like you said, come a lot of risks. And so I think it really, with everything we do, and we're trying to move toward this in a large sense in our industry, is everything should be risk-based, because in the past we've done everything, we've kind of overdone the regulations. And so as we try to make sense out of everything, whether it be IoT, OT, or even how we validate systems, we're trying to do that all based on risk. So I think for us right now, it's still too risky, and we want to wait for others to blaze that trail for us.
What does Melisco see?
So we have clients kind of on both ends. We have a lot of clients that are in regulated industries, just like Bausch, that they'll put a system in back in early 2000s that are running on legacy OS, not really up to date on antivirus, but they're completely islands. So it's tough to get those types of clients to move into the connected enterprise because of those constraints. And obviously it's tough for them to write a use case to spend the money to upgrade, because it's purely an upgrade just so you're more secure. But then we have other clients that truly embrace it, and they'll put as much data as they can and allow access and expose data to the enterprise. So it's really interesting to see the mix between the two different types of clients.
Okay, Welton.
And we're a lot like that as well. There are systems that are older and legacy systems that have a hard time connecting and maybe can't get on our corporate networks due to compliance reasons. But there's definitely an effort afoot that is trying to connect everything, because there's value in being able to look down and see what assets that you have, and also checking that they are compliant, whether that be with hardware or software. And as far as our models on how we try to achieve that is, we try to isolate those things that should be isolated, and open up just portals to get to the devices or to the assets that need to get through, and put ACLs around things to try to reduce our risk. But we definitely are trying to make is anything that's automated or anything that's a computer visible to the enterprise, because you can have a lot reduce your cost of personnel by having all of this stuff monitored or being able to be accessed, and keeps you compliant and keeps you from having other problems.
Yes, I was going to say, it's probably also the trade-off between being able to do remote maintenance.
Yes.
You know, especially as
Exactly.
the number of personnel in the plants has certainly contracted over the years, and just being able to monitor and maintain those machines from kind of any point on the planet. I know, David, you know, you've been in the, I guess in the beginning, you started in the M2M business before IoT was quite the buzzword it is. So what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I agree with the panel. We have some customers that don't allow any access in, but to ones that, of course, it's a lot more open. The trend is to allow third parties or partners to come in remotely. What we do in our product to alleviate their concerns, again, is we have this role-based security model. So we, like an integrator, will belong to a group that is only allowed to do 3 things. And then when they connect, and the connection is controlled by the customer, it's outbound only, and when they need it. So the integrator comes in and basically we put him on a sandbox, and then when it's done, the connection is gone. But the trend is definitely a lot remote collaboration, because you know the machines are getting more complex, the headcount, the IP is higher, and you know you have to be able to scale, and you need to leverage this remote kind of access.
Okay. Mark, do we have some audience questions?
So actually you asked a very good question. I wanted to specifically ask, how often do your vendors, whether they are the primary component or a secondary component in your system, how often do they announce upgrades? How close to zero downtime is the process of upgrading? And who is carrying out these upgrades for you?
Brad or Wilton?
I guess the first question, so we do upgrades usually only when we're forced, to by the system. So we don't tend to just apply every patch that comes out from Microsoft or from the automation vendors. We also tend to, I guess the other part of your question was in terms of like allowing access. We try to allow access to our integrators for the individual systems, but we don't allow them to really make changes that are uncontrolled. So we really don't try to make changes to the system because they're validated systems. Any change we make, we have to go through change management process and revalidation process. So it is a burden on us that has to provide value at the end. So.
Okay, and Weldon?
Pretty much the same thing. Being in a validated environment, everything is under change control. But as far as what drives an upgrade or a patch, if there's some vulnerability that's known, or that a vendor says, hey, if we need to apply this patch and we think we're going to put us at risk, we will usually do that in a test environment, verify that it doesn't break anything, that in production, or that if we deployed it to production, and go ahead and put it out there, because if it's a vulnerability for them and we're using their products, then it's a vulnerability to us. And if we're as many of these deployments as that we're going to have, I mean, it's it puts business at risk. As far as upgrades, we typically don't upgrade unless there's absolutely necessary, because if it's not broke, don't fix it. So, and if it's secure, then we're all happy.
Steve, what about from the systems integrators perspective?
Typically, what kind of mirror what both these guys said is when we're asked to do upgrades or apply patches. With the virtual world, we will get the image of the running system deployed in a sandbox environment, apply those patches or apply those upgrades, basically run an offline validation, if you will, and make sure that things run just like they used to. And in opportunities that we have, we'll take those virtual images that were then tested and deploy them, so we can deploy pretty quickly. But most places are the same mindset as if it's not broke, don't fix it, and kind of leave it alone. But we do have some clients that will patch, like Microsoft patches on a routine basis, or even an application patch on a routine basis. But it really depends, and most people will just kind of leave the system as is until there's a major enhancement.
And David, what about your Telit's customers?
They vary, but they all align. Basically, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But many use virtualization techniques like what we provide. They test it offline sometimes, and they deploy at the appropriate times. But it depends on the industry. On a highly regulated industry, it's not very simple. In discrete manufacturing, they usually wait for maybe a weekend or one of the 2 plant shutdown times, but they don't make changes. You know, they're making parts and they don't want to apply things unless it's a vulnerability or something of the kind.
Yeah, I was going to say the holy grail is thou shall never have unscheduled downtime.
Another thing to add there, you know, one of the things we do is we always look for partners, whether it be on the software side or integration side, who really understand change management and patch management, because like with our automation vendors, per se, we'll go in and ask them up front, how do you evaluate Microsoft patches? Show us your team, or explain to us your process for evaluating these changes as they come, because we do have changes that we really need to apply, especially now as these systems become more open, the security vulnerability. So when Microsoft provides a patch that we believe is important for cybersecurity, we're going to want to apply that. And so we need them to be vetting those things on the applications that we're running on those servers that have Microsoft OSs. And we also tend to try to stay away from the commercial OSs in a lot of our equipment. We tend to like systems that aren't commercially available or a little more closed, so that we don't have to worry about adding virus protection, you know, managing the patches along the way. It's just a safer, less risky environment for us.
Okay. Mark, do you have any questions?
Yeah, so we heard from Andy in his keynote about a connected worker and how there's this new growth of user interface, path of mobility, et cetera, and new technology. And I was just wondering, you describe a challenge of you don't make a change because it's not broken, but other people and new entrants into the market do make sets of changes and create competitive advantage through introduction of new technology, which drives new efficiencies. So how do you, from a production and an OT perspective, look and evaluate technologies that are going to enhance the way the worker does the work, not necessarily how the system does the work?
Weldon or Fred?
You want to go first?
So sounds like your question is, how do we evaluate whether, if we change this or do this upgrade, is it going to benefit? Are the benefits going to be greater than the cost of not doing it? Is that a better way?
No. So we're talking about is automation technology, which is process driven and process based. But the other side of the automation is the human, right? And so what we're seeing in IT is the consumerization of IT. People bringing their own devices.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't want to do that. But we're also seeing in the industrial space, people bringing in their own industrial devices from a company perspective, where they're saying, hey, we want to improve the capability of the human. We want to go ahead and bring a mobile device in, which was sort of described there. I was just curious, how do you guys go about evaluating which of those technologies will be secure enough, will be able to fit into the OT side of the house versus it just being something that IT actually brings to as a solution? Does that clarify?
Yeah, it clarifies. For the most part, as far as everything's going to be driven by cost. What is it going to cost me to implement this, and how many more units am I going to get out the back of the machine, if I implement it? If that costs out, if the benefits outweigh the cost, then usually it's a business person who says, "Hey, IT guys, engineering guys, they may or may not be aware that there may be some security issue or some problem, but they depend on us to figure it out and make it work." And we haven't been unsuccessful thus far as being able to do that.
Brad, you?
I guess it depends on what the tool is. I mean, if the tool is just a monitoring tool, or if the tool is a maintenance aid or something like that, that really doesn't have a direct quality impact on the process or the packaging process, then we have a lot more flexibility there. But if it's a tool that's going to impact the process, then those things get vetted very heavily. And we really are, in terms of bringing your own devices, we don't really have a bring your own device policy. The bring your own device policy is a mobile device or things like that would have to be the corporate approved device with the corporate approved software, so we lock things down and provide security that way by controlling what devices are used.
Okay, and Steve from...
Yeah, for like an example, if we go to a client, we want to implement tablets on the market. That's one of the big things that we try to push. The biggest challenge we have is the cost. Trying to sell or help our plant engineer sell the idea of the benefit of going mobile. They have to make sure they have the wireless infrastructure in place. That's probably the biggest challenge in our field, is going to a lot of facilities that don't have a wireless infrastructure in place on the plant floor. So then it's a bigger thing. But we try to look at what's coming out, what is new, and offer that to our clients. But it is a lot of times challenging based on what kind of policies the end user has in place, and trying to sell that idea, because obviously everybody's looking for a return on it.
Okay, and David?
Yeah, I'm along those lines. Our customers, I have seen the whole range, but in the end, if the ROI and this business value and it complies with the standards, I think by all means they've done it. I have seen cases where they don't do, because maybe it's just a gadget or something. Mm-hmm. But if it has business value, absolutely, I think they'll go for it.
Okay. And our last question of the session is about culture, as far as the traditionally the OT culture versus the IT culture. In some plants, obviously, that could be 180 degrees diametrically opposed. We seem to find that every plant has made different progress as far as being able to unify the culture in the plants between the two domains, and sometimes that firewall still exists in between, or sometimes that firewall's been broken. So I'd say let's ask Brad and Welton, what are your experiences as far as the firewalls within your own plant, and then ask Steve and David to comment as well.
I think at the plants that I support within Bausch, both Tampa and Greenville, South Carolina, the culture is very good. I mean, they're very different plants. They have two very different cultures, but they're also the IT and OT guys, because they're small teams, they work well together. We don't really have any issues where we have a large automation team fighting against a large IT team, which is really an advantage, because they know they have to partner. They're small groups. And they've also been very easy to work with from the outside. So as a person coming from a regional engineering team, my goal is to really try to help them and not, tell them what to do, but help guide them, help make sure that they understand what other possibilities are out there, help them share between the sites and learn together. But I've been pleased that the folks, I think it's really due to the size of the team, that they've really been good at working together.
Good. And Welton?
So it's been evolution. There's in our facilities, we have pretty large engineering teams, and at one time pretty large IT team, but that's changed a little bit. And I've seen it evolve from being a total love-hate relationship to a situation where we recognize that neither group's going to be successful unless we work together. So I would say over the last several years, it's definitely gotten better. And then there's been like the skill sets. There's a lot of overlap nowadays, where before there hasn't been. So I think both groups kind of understand each other a little bit better now than maybe they did in years past. So it's been good the last few years.
Yeah, what are you finding with your customers?
So, we like I said, we position ourselves to kind of be a moderator between the two groups, and really ask the questions bring the two groups together and be proactive. You know, don't wait until you run into the issue, like Weldon said with his project. Try to identify those as much as you can. Obviously, you can't identify everything, but really try to bring those groups together. We do have a lot of plants where they already kind of past that stage, but there's still a lot that it's you know, like the evil empire, IT versus OT, and it's still, you know, still hard to get those groups together, but we just have to be proactive and kind of, you know, bring them together.
Okay, and your customers?
Well, I have seen everything. Even in the same industry, I have seen some car makers where IT and OT, they just flat out refuse to be even friendly, to the ones that management has just dissolved them and make them work together as a unit. As a software provider, I have to become like an eHarmony, and I have to provide a software that makes both sides happy. So the IT guys are on their world with their BAPIs and their schemas and queues, and the controls people are happy with their tags, their PLCs, and their ladder logic, and you know, algorithms and things. So, but I've seen everything.
Yeah, eHarmony, that's a good analogy. Hopefully they all like walks on the beach and they like the same kind of wine. But with that, please join me in applauding the panel and the speakers. I think they did a great job today.